What if civilization began not once, but twice, before Sumers, ziggurats, and clay tablets? There may have been memories drowned beneath rising seas, hidden under desert sands, carved in stone and whispered in myth. In this journey, memory, cartographers, secrets buried before Sumar, we wander through fragments of forgotten worlds, ancient maps, vanished coastlines, cave handprints glowing like stars, and stories that refuse to be silenced. This is not about conspiracy, but about wonder, about the quiet map of memory that still connects us across thousands of years. You are lying there now, warm, the world softening around you. And I want you to imagine a map, not the kind folded in a drawer or glowing on your phone, but a map of the earth itself, one drawn by seas that rise and seas that fall. Close your eyes, if you like, and picture the outline of the continents shifting, coastlines reaching far into what is now dark water, then retreating, then swelling again. You may think of history as something stable, set in ink and taught with neat timelines, but the earth is less patient than our textbooks. It moves, it floods, it forgets. And so maybe, just maybe, the story of civilization, the one that begins in Sumer around 4000 BCE, is not the first story at all, but only the first that we can still see. Isn't it strange how the narrative begins so suddenly, like a curtain, pulled back on a stage already crowded with actors, props, and painted scenery? Writing, mathematics, religion, laws, agriculture, architecture, so many things appear in those river valleys, as though they had been rehearsed somewhere else. Have you ever wondered why the prelude is missing? Why the slope is so steep? Why? The record begins already halfway into the performance. Perhaps you were taught that people wandered deserts, gathered berries in forests, and then almost overnight began building ziggurats, carving laws onto clay tablets, organizing trade routes, and singing hymns to the gods of sun and sky. If civilization is such a complicated machine, would it not require prototypes, failures, abandoned blueprints? Machines usually begin with tinkering. A wheel is first a log, then a smoothed round, then a cart. Why does the city appear already polished, already humming? Maybe there were smaller experiments, societies rising on the edges of rivers, villagers testing crops, temples aligning to solstices. But most of those traces have been drowned, silted, or scattered. Water has a way of hiding things. Think of a fishing net left too long in the tide, threads knotted with weeds, heavy with silt, impossible to untangle. Our history is a net like that, half torn, half buried, pieces missing. You may be tempted to say, if there was something before, where are the monuments, the tools, the records? But pause and listen. The sea does not preserve well. Wood swells, walls collapse, roofs dissolve. Even the proudest stone eventually fractures, like bread crust softened in soup. And as ice sheets melted at the end of the last glacial maximum, oceans rose more than 100 meters. Imagine whole coastal plains, the places most likely to have been inhabited, sliding quietly under the waves. No collapse, no fire, no drama, just silence, rising inch by inch, year by year, until a town became a harbor and then a reef. Have you heard of Doggerland? Once it connected Britain to mainland Europe, a fertile plain with rivers and lakes where hunters stalked mammoths. Now it lies beneath the North Sea, drowned silently, almost politely. So if people built and gathered there, their hearths and tools rest under the sand, visited only by fish and currents. And who will dive deep enough, long enough to brush away that silt. Visibility is poor, funding is scarce, careers are fragile. Sometimes forgetting is easier. Tonight, let yourself drift backward, past the neat certainty of your schoolbook diagrams. Tonight, let yourself wonder whether Sumer was a beginning or a continuation. Tonight, let yourself think about how memory works not only in individuals but in cultures. There is a phrase, cultural amnesia. The way entire societies forget skills once mastered, languages once fluent, tools once common. Think of the Antikythera mechanism, that intricate device pulled from a shipwreck in the Aegean. It predicted celestial motions with gears cut more finely than clockmakers would achieve for another millennium. Who made it? Why was the knowledge lost, only to be reinvented centuries later? The machine is a whisper that memory can falter, that hands once deft can stiffen, that what is known can be forgotten. If it happened in Greece, why not elsewhere, in deeper time, before Sumer, before clay tablets and priest kings? You cannot say for sure. None of us can. But the silence does not mean nothing was there. Picture yourself now walking along a shoreline not found on any modern map, where reeds sway and shallow rivers braid into lagoons. A woman bends to strain milk through a clay sieve. Did you know that the earliest evidence for cheesemaking is over 7,000 years old? Strainers found in Poland, faint traces of milk fat still clinging. Someone was already experimenting with flavors long before the first city gates swung open. Doesn't that feel strangely comforting? That the tongue remembered tastes even when stone walls had not yet risen. Imagine her lifting the curd, tasting, frowning, offering a piece to a child who giggles. Civilization is not only laws and monuments. It is food, it is song, it is the rhythm of daily hands. Perhaps those rhythms built their own invisible monuments, ones that crumbled without leaving stone, but remained in custom, in myth. In small acts passed on as you rest, you may hear the rhythm of waves against the shore, and I want you to notice how similar it is to the rhythm of forgetting and remembering. A wave rises, carries foam, withdraws. Another follows. Each time something is erased, something else is revealed. Archaeologists scrape with brushes, sift with sieves, measure layers. They do not shout. They do not uncover golden statues to the sound of trumpets. They wait, patiently, listening to Earth's whisper. And sometimes, beneath a mound that looks like nothing more than a farmer's hill, they find foundations, rooms, burials, shapes carved with patterns whose meaning is lost. A child's toy, a ritual mask, a tally of harvests, or something else entirely. Hard to say, always hard to say. So here you are, listening, and perhaps you are expecting answers, but maybe answers are not the point. Maybe the point is to wander, softly, through questions that make the night deeper, questions that allow you to rest inside mystery. What if Sumer was not the pedestal, but the echo? What if civilization did not begin in fire and stone, but in water and memory? What if the true monuments are not ziggurats, but the taste of cheese, the angle of stars, the lull of myths told by firelight? These questions are not meant to unsettle you. They are meant to carry you like a slow current, toward a place where the known and the unknown can rest side by side. The map is not finished. It may never be finished. But tonight, as you drift, let the lines blur, let the coastlines shift. Let the drowned plains rise again in your imagination. You walk across Doggerland, across the shelves now hidden. You see huts of reed, smoke from a hearth, children running with carved toys, elders pointing to the sky. The tide comes in, it always comes in, yet the memory lingers. Perhaps that is. All civilization is, a tide of memory, sometimes high, sometimes low, never still, never gone. And maybe, just maybe, you are part of that tide too. You have already begun to drift with the tide of memory. And now let us descend more carefully into the earth itself, into the slow language of geology. Imagine that you are holding the world in your palm, not as a globe of nations, borders and cities, but as layers of stone and water, lines of coast advancing and retreating like the breath of a sleeping giant. You know the seas have risen, but perhaps you have not felt how much. More than 100 meters since the last great ice began to melt. Enough to swallow whole landscapes, enough to redraw every shoreline that early people once called home. Think of valleys where mammoths grazed becoming bays filled with seals, of forests turning into tidal mudflats where only gulls cried. The map we trust today is only a single frame of a long film. The frames before are buried in the sea. Perhaps you wonder why, if so much land was drowned, we have not uncovered the cities that might have stood there. Why no pyramids under the waves, no grand avenues between coral? But here you must pause. Underwater archaeology is not a parade of discoveries. It is a patience game with poor visibility, scarce funding, and heavy risk. Currents sweep sand across foundations. Wood rots, clay dissolves. Even stone walls collapse, becoming natural ridges indistinguishable from geology. A diver's torch illuminates only a meter or two in murky water. The ocean guards her secrets well. And perhaps it is better that way, for some stories must be whispered, not shouted. Still, now and then, the earth leaves clues. Doggerland, that fertile plain between Britain and Europe, once supported herds and villages. Fishermen still dredge up antlers, tools, sometimes fragments of hearths. The North Sea above is grey, restless, filled with oil rigs and trawlers, but beneath lies a ghost landscape. Try to imagine walking there, reeds brushing your legs, the smell of smoke drifting from a fire, the ground soft with peat. A child throws a stone into a stream that today lies 100 kilometers offshore. You might say this was no civilization, only hunters and gatherers. But to them it was home, and home is the seed of memory. The drowned land is a reminder that civilization does not begin with ziggurats, but with the stubborn act of staying. Breathe with that thought now. Inhale, the chisel strikes. Exhale, the dust falls. Inhale, the block shifts. Exhale, it locks into place. This rhythm is not only mechanical but spiritual, the heartbeat of builders whose names you do not know, but whose patience still whispers. And so tonight, let the stones remind you that civilization is not about machines or mysteries, but about the will to shape the world into meaning. Whether with forgotten techniques or with persistence we underestimate, the result is the same. Monuments that endure, puzzles that provoke, grooves that whisper across time. You may not solve them, but you can listen, you can marvel, you can carry the humility of knowing that human hands, patient and stubborn, have always been capable of more than we expect. You have lingered among stones that stand tall, carved and fitted with uncanny care. But not every monument was left to weather, to collapse, to sink. Some were buried, some were sealed intentionally, as if their builders wanted them hidden, protected, or perhaps forgotten. Tonight, let us walk into that quieter mystery. Why? Would a people cover their own creation with soil? Why close a temple rather than leave it open? Why hide memory rather than display it? The answer is uncertain, layered with hypotheses, but the act itself is striking. To bury is not to abandon, it is to choose silence. Imagine standing at Göbekli Tepe again, the great circle of pillars carved 12,000 years ago. Fact: archaeologists found not only monumental stones, but also the surprising evidence that much of the site was deliberately backfilled. Tons of rubble, stone chips, and earth were packed into its enclosures, covering the pillars until they disappeared beneath a hill. Who would do this? And why? Some suggest practical reasons. The structures outlived their purpose, and filling them stabilized the ground. Others point to ritual closure, a decision to end a chapter, to seal sacredness like a letter folded and placed in an envelope. The truth is unclear, but the gesture lingers. It was not collapse, not conquest, but a deliberate hand pressing earth back into place. Picture the scene. People gather around the pillars one last time. They carry baskets of soil, stones, fragments. They sing as they pour, layer upon layer, until carvings vanish from view. Perhaps they weep, perhaps they celebrate. The act is solemn, collective. When the last pillar is covered, they step back, leaving behind not a ruin but a mound, a hill that to outsiders looks natural. What was once sacred remains sacred, only hidden. Isn't it strange? We imagine monuments are meant to be seen, yet here the monument was meant to disappear. What does that mean? Open debate. Was it reverence, protection, fear, or simply practicality? You may think of other places, too. Fact: in Mesoamerica, temples were often built over older ones, new layers rising above, older layers entombed. The Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan hides previous structures within. The Maya sometimes buried steely or sealed doorways deliberately. In Egypt, sacred chambers were filled in after rituals. Across the world, people closed what they once opened. They did not simply walk away, they sealed. Civilization does not only build, it also hides. Perhaps you wonder if this hiding was an act of memory or of forgetting, maybe both. To bury a temple is to preserve it from erosion, to tuck it into earth like a child into bed, to keep it safe for another age. But it is also to remove it from daily life, to let its presence slip into myth. It becomes a whisper rather than a shout. Civilization, then, is not only about making visible, but about controlling when and how things are remembered. To seal is to curate memory, deciding what should be carried forward and what should rest. Imagine yourself taking part in such a ceremony. You hold a basket of soil, heavy, damp. You step into the enclosure where pillars rise, shadows long in the setting. Sun. You pour the soil slowly, watching it settle into grooves, cover carvings. Your hands tremble. You know you are ending something, closing a story. And yet, you also know you are protecting it, hiding it from storms, from eyes that might not understand. In that moment, you feel both grief and relief. The monument will vanish from sight, but not from existence. It will sleep beneath the earth, waiting. This notion of waiting is powerful. What is buried is not gone. It is suspended. A sealed chamber is a message across time, a whisper intended for someone else, centuries later. Archaeologists who dig today are the recipients of that message. They brush soil away and reveal carvings that eyes have not seen for millennia. They are the ones who opened the letter sealed so long ago. The builders could not have imagined our tools, our languages, our world and yet their act of burial ensured we would meet them. Isn't that astonishing? Civilization writes to the future not only with books but with silence. Perhaps you recall how individuals bury time capsules, letters, toys, newspapers, so that future generations might know them. These ancient burials were time capsules on a grand scale. Were they conscious of us, of you, of anyone yet unborn? Maybe not. Maybe their intent was only ritual. But the effect is the same. Memory suspended, delivered later. That is what burial does. It bends time, preserving fragments against decay, handing them forward. And yet, there is unease, too. Hypothesis: some suggest that sites were sealed out. A fear that something dangerous lingered, that the gods had to be contained, that the sacred had turned perilous. To bury was to quarantine, to close what should not be opened again. If so, then every excavation is also a trespass, an intrusion into sacred silence. We open what was meant to stay closed. We turn whisper into noise. Is that wise? Hard to say. But the question lingers. Civilization always balances curiosity with caution. Now breathe with that thought. Inhale, a basket lifted. Exhale, soil poured. Inhale, carvings covered. Exhale, silence deepening. This rhythm is not destruction, but closure, a deliberate lull, a chosen forgetting that preserves memory in another way. Civilization survives, not only by shouting, but by knowing when to be silent. So tonight, as you lie here, imagine hills around you, quiet mounds that are not hills at all, but sealed stories, waiting. Beneath them lie pillars, carvings, chambers. They do not cry out, they wait. Perhaps the future will unearth them, perhaps not. But in either case, the act of burial has meaning. It tells you that memory is not only in the open, but also in the hidden, not only in light, but also in shadow. And sometimes, to remember fully, we must also forget. Let that paradox soothe you. Civilization is both presence and absence, both building and burying, both remembering and letting go. And you, too, are part of that cycle. You carry some memories forward. You release others into silence. You choose what to tell, what to hide, what to seal in the quiet of your heart. That, too, is cartography. That, too, is the map of memory. You have stood beside stones, deliberately buried, sealed like letters across time. Now the tide of memory carries you into another kind of burial one, not of soil, but of longing. Across cultures, across centuries, people have spoken of golden ages, of lost worlds greater than their own, of civilizations drowned or burned or faded, remembered not as ruins, but as ideals. Tonight, let us wander through these myths of perfection, past, not to prove or disprove, but to listen to the yearning they hold. For sometimes what is remembered most vividly is not the fall of a city, but the dream of a world better than ours. You have heard of Atlantis, perhaps the city described by Plato, proud and powerful, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Fact, historians debate endlessly whether Plato meant it as allegory, as moral lesson, or as distorted memory of real disaster. Open debate, some say it echoes the eruption of Thera on Santorini, which destroyed much of the Minoan world. Others imagine it as memory of older floods, perhaps of Ice Age coasts drowned. Still others insist it is only philosophy, no history at all. And yet, whatever the origin, Atlantis endures. The name itself has become a symbol for lost greatness, for the suspicion that what came before might have been brighter, wiser, stronger. Isn't it curious that we remember most vividly not the empires that truly rose and fell, but the ones we are not sure ever existed? But Atlantis is only one voice in a chorus. Fact, in Mesopotamia, the Sumerian king list speaks of rulers before the flood who reigned for impossibly long lifespans of thousands of years. Myth, exaggeration, or distorted memory of dynasties before disaster? Hard to say. In Hindu tradition, texts speak of previous yugas, ages of humanity before our own, when lifespans were longer, virtues greater, knowledge deeper. In the Andes, stories tell of Viracocha, a civilizing god who came before the Inca, teaching arts and laws. In Egypt, the gods themselves were said to have ruled in the distant past, building before men did. These are not isolated curiosities, they are patterns. Almost everywhere, people whisper of ages before, golden or divine, when the world was better, when wisdom was deeper, when memory stretched farther. Why? Perhaps because nostalgia is woven into us. Every generation looks backward, imagines the past as simpler, purer. Perhaps these golden ages are not geological at all, but psychological mirrors of our longing for innocence. And yet, perhaps, there is more. Perhaps these stories encode fragments of real events. Cities drowned, cultures forgotten, technologies lost. Memory collapses details, exaggerates lifespans, turns villages into empires, but still carries the kernel of truth. Hypothesis: maybe there were communities with skills we underestimate, navigation, agriculture, architecture, that vanished and left only whispers. The stories keep the whisper alive. Picture yourself listening to such a tale around a fire. An elder leans close, voice low, eyes reflecting the flames. Long ago, they say, before our people, there was a world greater. Its towers touched the clouds, its gardens bloomed without end, its people lived long and wise, but they grew proud, and the gods drowned them. The children listen wide-eyed. You listen too, caught not by the warning, but by the wistfulness. What if it were true? What if memory is not linear but cyclical, each age inheriting fragments of the last? What if Sumer, Egypt, the Maya, all were inheritors, not inventors? Now imagine the emotional power of such myths. They do not only warn, they also comfort. If a golden age once existed, perhaps it will return. If greatness was lost, perhaps it can be regained. Myths of lost worlds are not only memories of grief, they are also hopes disguised as history. They tell you that the present is not the pinnacle, that the future can be brighter. In this way, memory of the past becomes fuel for dreams of tomorrow. Think, again, of Atlantis. Plato may have written it as allegory, a caution against hubris, but readers across centuries turned it into something else, a beacon of possibility, proof that the earth once held secrets greater than ours. Even now, explorers scan the seafloor, divers search coastlines, satellites trace shadows beneath waves, hoping to find the city. Perhaps they will, perhaps they will not. The search itself is part of the myth, part of the memory. To look for Atlantis is to admit that you believe more may lie beneath the surface, that the story of civilization is not complete. That belief is a form of hope. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, the city rising. Exhale, the city sinking. Inhale, towers gleaming. Exhale, waves closing. In this rhythm lies the paradox of golden ages. They are both loss and longing, both grief and dream. Civilization remembers not only what it has, but what it wishes it had. That wish itself becomes part of memory, part of identity. Perhaps you wonder whether these myths are dangerous. Do they distract us from the real, the tangible? Maybe, but they also keep imagination alive. Without imagination, memory calcifies into lists, into data. With imagination, memory becomes alive, questioning, creative. Myths of golden ages remind us that knowledge can be lost, that wisdom can fade, that pride can lead to fall. They remind us too that what is gone can inspire what comes next. A story of Atlantis may not describe the past precisely, but it may inspire care for the present, humility for the future. And so tonight, as you drift deeper, let yourself rest in the glow of these golden age stories. They are not proofs, not equations, not certainties. They are longings made visible, hopes wrapped in memory. Civilization is not only what is, but what is imagined to have been, what is dreamed to return. In those dreams lies resilience, creativity, the refusal to accept that the present is all there is. That refusal is itself a form of survival. Close your eyes. Imagine the golden city, its gardens, its towers, its songs. Imagine it sinking, imagine it waiting, imagine it returning in memory, if not in stone. Inhale, dream, exhale, remember. You are part of the cycle now, carrying the whisper forward, adding your own longing to the map. Civilization, like you, dreams in both directions, toward the past and toward the future. And tonight, those dreams cradle you, softly, like waves around a sunken city. You have listened to whispers of golden ages, stories of cities brighter than our own, now swallowed by sea or fire. Tonight the tide of memory takes you back to the coastlines, to the edges of land and water, to the margins where civilizations may have thrived and then vanished without trace. For if seas have risen more than 100 meters since the Ice Age ended, how many villages, towns, even small cities now lie drowned? And if deserts can grow where rivers once flowed, how many roads, walls, and hearths now sleep under sand? The earth hides as much as it reveals. And perhaps, as you listen, you begin to sense that much of human memory lies not in libraries but beneath waves and dunes. Imagine Doggerland again, that drowned plain between Britain and Europe, a fertile land of rivers and lakes. Fact fishermen, dredging the North Sea, still pull up antlers, bones, stone tools. Once, families must have walked there, hunting, gathering, building huts. Now only fish circle above, and ships pass unaware. That landscape is not a myth but a fact, yet it lies hidden, erased from daily maps. How many other Doggerlands lie waiting, along coasts we know, beneath waters we rarely search. The continental shelf, broad and shallow, was once dry. It is now sea, and in that drowning lies a silence we mistake for emptiness. Picture the coasts of India. Fact off the Gulf of Comhat. Sonar surveys once revealed structures resembling walls and grids beneath the silt. Some hailed them as evidence of drowned cities. Others dismissed them as natural formations. The debate remains unresolved. Open debate, were they settlements washed away by rising seas, or only illusions carved by current and sand? Hard to say. But even without certainty, the image lingers. Stone beneath waves, geometry beneath silt, memory hidden under salt water now. Let your mind drift to the Black Sea. Fact, around 7,600 years ago, Rising Mediterranean waters are thought to have breached into the basin, flooding coastal plains and displacing communities. Some researchers connect this to flood myths of the Near East. Villages drowned, fields lost, families forced to flee. Imagine standing on that shore, watching the sea climb day after day, year after year, until your home is gone. How could you not remember? How could you not tell your children in story and song? And what of deserts? Sand, like water, erases and preserves. Beneath the Sahara lie hints of rivers, channels now dry, valleys that once carried life. Satellite images reveal lines across the dunes, ghost rivers invisible from the ground. Fact, archaeologists have found rock art of swimmers in caves, evidence that the Sahara was once green, filled with lakes and animals. Where there are lakes, there are people. Where there are people, there are memories, tools, perhaps even towns. Yet sand covers them, guarding them in silence. Hypothesis, some speculate entire settlements remain buried beneath dunes, waiting. Others argue the evidence is faint, scattered, fragile. But the possibility itself is haunting. Civilizations beneath sand, forgotten not by collapse but by climate. Imagine walking across a desert today, endless waves of dunes, wind stinging your face. You see only emptiness, but beneath your feet may lie hearthstones, potsherds, walls. Each grain of sand a veil, each dune a curtain. Civilization may be less absent than hidden. Isn't that thought both unsettling and comforting? The memory is not gone, it only sleeps. Picture now a diver descending along a continental shelf. Their torch flickers across what looks like a stair, or a wall, or perhaps just rock-shaped. By current, they hover, uncertain. Their heart quickens. Above them, the sea is silent. Below them, the question lingers. They rise, they report, they debate, and we, far away, read headlines, argue, forget. Meanwhile, the site waits, unchanged, patient. Civilization is not hurried. It can wait millennia. Perhaps you ask, why don't we search more? Why not scan every shelf, every desert, every plain? Because it is costly, dangerous, difficult. Oceans are vast deserts shifting, resources limited. We study fragments where we can, and we speculate about the rest. Open debate, some say we over-romanticize, seeing cities where none existed. Others argue we underestimate, ignoring evidence because it does not fit neat timelines. Both positions circle each other like tides, never quite resolving. And in between, memory hovers, half seen, half hidden. Now close your eyes and imagine. The map again. The modern coasts shrink. Seas recede. Deserts turn green. You see new outlines of land-broad shelves, fertile plains, winding rivers across what is now the Sahara, villages along what is now the seafloor. You see families gathering reeds, herding animals, building fires. You see towns rising, perhaps temples, perhaps only markets. Then, slowly, the sea returns, the sand advances, and all is hidden again. It happens not in a day, not in a year, but over lifetimes. To those who lived it, it felt like eternity. To us, it is a blink. Civilization drowns silently, buries itself softly, without protest. Breathe with that image. Inhale, see retreating. Exhale, see advancing. Inhale, sand lifting. Exhale, sand falling. The rhythm of earth is patient, inexorable. Civilizations adapt or vanish, but memory clings, disguised as myth. preserved in fragments, waiting for rediscovery. And so, tonight, let the thought settle. Much of human story may lie beneath coasts and dunes, unseen but not absent. Civilization is not only what we find, but also what we imagine still hidden. The memory map is incomplete, but incompleteness is its beauty. It reminds you that mystery endures, that curiosity persists, that hope survives. Perhaps one day divers will brush away silt, or satellites will scan dunes, and fragments will surface. Perhaps not. Either way, the possibility itself is memory, a whisper that keeps you connected to those who walked the drowned plains, who swam in the green Sahara, who lit fires where waves now break. Tonight, as you rest, imagine yourself among them. You stand at a shoreline that no longer exists, watching the tide rise slowly toward your hut. You walk across a desert that was once a lake, listening to the silence where water once sang. You are both there and here, then and now, carrying fragments across time. That is what it means to be human, to live not only in the present, but in the echoes, in the hidden, in the memory buried beneath sea and sand. You have wandered across drowned plains and deserts turned to sand, and perhaps you have noticed something curious. To speak of places long hidden is itself to draw a kind of map. Tonight, let us linger on maps themselves, not the glowing screens you consult today, but the fragile parchments, etched stones, and whispered directions of the past. For maps are more than guides. They are memories flattened into lines, knowledge pressed into shape, attempts to hold the vastness of the world in the palm of a hand. And sometimes they are stranger than we expect, too accurate, too detailed, as if they remembered things that should not yet have been known. Imagine unrolling a chart drawn centuries ago. The parchment smells faintly of dust and salt, ink traces, coastlines with surprising precision, bays and rivers shaped almost as they appear on modern maps. Yet this chart was drawn long before satellites, long before even reliable compasses. Fact, one such chart, the Peary Race map of 1513, puzzled scholars because it seemed to show parts of South America and even Antarctica's coast with uncanny accuracy. Was it coincidence? Was it skillful guesswork, piecing together sailors' reports? Or was it, as some hypotheses suggest, a copy of older sources now lost? Hard to say. The chart itself remains, a whisper of memory whose origin is uncertain. Perhaps you wonder how such accuracy could arise without modern tools. Consider this. Sailors measured distances with knots and time, took bearings from the stars, and sketched. What they saw, errors were common, yet patterns emerged. A skilled navigator could piece fragments into something remarkably close to reality. That is one explanation. Another is that they inherited knowledge maps from earlier times, reinterpreted, preserved not as parchment but as rumor, myth, or oral tradition. Open debate, some argue that fragments of ancient cartography survived through Byzantine or Arab intermediaries, traces of older worlds resurfacing. Others dismiss such claims, insisting that coincidence and exaggeration explain the anomalies. The truth floats somewhere between, blurred like ink in water. Picture yourself as a sailor centuries ago, tracing coastlines by memory, adding pen strokes to a map that already feels older than your own life. You do not invent the shapes, you inherit them. You add what you know, but much is already there, handed down. Perhaps you wonder, who first drew this? Who first imagined the earth as a whole? You do not know, and so you sail, trusting lines you cannot explain. That is what memory is. To trust in fragments carried forward, even when their source is gone. Maps also exist in myth. Fact, Polynesian stick charts, delicate frameworks of sticks and shells, represent swells, currents, islands. They are not maps in the Western sense, but they guide canoes across thousands of miles. The Marshallese navigator does not look at the chart while sailing. He memorizes it, then feels the waves beneath the canoe. The chart is memory externalized, then internalized again. Isn't that beautiful? The map is not just a picture of the world. It is a conversation between ocean and body, wave and hand. Civilization thrives not only by drawing maps on parchment, but by carrying maps inside skin and song. Now let your imagination drift back further, to the idea of maps long vanished. Could there have been charts drawn on bark, leather, sand that did not survive? Hypothesis: if seafaring cultures existed before the floods, their maps would have been fragile, perishable, lost with rising seas. Yet perhaps fragments survived. Indirectly, embedded in later charts, carried forward by rumor. That may explain why some medieval Portolan maps of Europe appear so geometrically precise, almost as if based on older, more exact sources. Or perhaps, again, it is only our eagerness to find mystery where there is only skill. Both possibilities remain, and in the tension between them, memory breathes. Consider, too, how maps can tell us not only what was known, but what was imagined. Some depict islands that do not exist, continents misplaced, seas stretched. These are not mistakes, but memory blended with longing, myth drawn as geography. The island of St. Brendan, Hebraziel, off Ireland's coast, Chipangu, far to the east. Sailors sought them, dreamed them, sometimes swore they had seen them. Were they illusions, or distorted memories of real lands glimpsed in earlier times? The question is less about truth than about persistence. These phantom islands remind you that maps are never only about the world outside. They are also about the world inside, the hopes and fears of those who draw them. Now imagine a map as a kind of prayer. A scribe sits at a table, candlelight flickering. He draws coastlines with care, not because he has seen them all, but because he trusts the memory of others. Each stroke is an act of faith in community, in transmission. He may embellish, may err, but the intention is steady, to hold memory. Still, isn't that what civilization always does? Tries to freeze the flowing, to pin the shifting, to catch the tide in ink. And though it never succeeds completely, the attempt itself is sacred. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, lines drawn. Exhale, ink drying. Inhale, coast remembered. Exhale, sea forgotten. Your breath becomes cartography, mapping the rhythm of remembering and forgetting. You, too, are a map maker, tracing the contours of memory in your mind tonight. And so, as you drift deeper, consider this. Maps are not only guides to where we are, they are testaments to where we have been, and hints of where we hope to go. Some maps puzzle us because they seem too accurate. Some puzzle us because they show lands that never were. But all maps, even the strangest, are memory. They preserve fragments of the world as it was seen, imagined, or inherited. And whether those fragments are fact or fantasy hardly matters. What matters is that they endure, lines inked against forgetting. So let yourself imagine now that you hold a map not of land or sea, but of civilization itself. Each fragment we have visited, Doggerland, Gogokli, Tepi, Yonaguni, Atlantis, the Sahara, the Piri race, chart is marked. Some coastlines are sharp, others blurred. Some lands exist, others are dreamed. You trace your finger across them all, and you realize this is not just geography. It is memory, drawn by countless hands across countless nights. And you are one more hand, one more mind, adding your own lines. That is enough. That is the true cartography. You have traced coastlines with maps, seen islands both real and imagined, lines inked with certainty and longing. Now let us turn to another kind of map, the map of language. For every tongue is a chart, every script a coastline of thought. And just as seas rise and bury villages, so too do languages vanish, leaving fragments, whispers, or sometimes nothing at all. Tonight, let us wander among these vanished voices, scripts etched in clay or carved in stone, some understood, some still mute. Civilization speaks not only through monuments but through words, and when the words fall silent, we are left with riddles. Imagine holding a tablet in your hands. Its surface is cool clay, impressed with tiny signs spiraling outward. They look deliberate, orderly, as if they should speak. Yet you cannot read them. Fact such is the Phaistos disc, discovered on Crete in 1908, stamped with over 200 symbols arranged in a spiral. Scholars have argued for more than a century about its meaning, prayer, calendar, song, forgery. Open debate, no consensus has emerged. The symbols remain mute, their voice trapped, their story untold. You turn the disc in your hand, wondering if meaning is still there, waiting for the right mind, or if it has drowned forever. Now, think of the Indus Valley, one of the great cradles of early civilization. Fact, between 2600 and 1900 BCE, cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa flourished with planned streets, drainage systems, standardized weights. Yet their script short sequences carved on seals and tablets remains undeciphered. Hundreds of signs, repeated patterns, hints of structure, but no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual text. Some scholars argue it is a true language, lost but recoverable. Others claim it may have been symbolic, a system of marks not tied to speech. Hypothesis: if it was language, then an entire civilization's voice lies locked away, silenced by time. Imagine their markets, their hymns, their laws, all unread, all waiting. And then there are language isolates, tongues that stand alone, with no known relatives. Fact: Basque in Europe, Burushaski in the Himalayas, Kusunda in Nepal. These languages whisper of deep pasts, lineages cut off, family trees pruned until only a single branch remains. Each isolate is like an island on a map, surrounded by waves of silence. They remind you that language too can drown, leaving only a stubborn survivor. How many others vanished completely, leaving not even a branch? Picture yourself listening to one of these isolates. The words sound strange, without cousins in familiar speech, yet they are rich, expressive, filled with nuance. To the community that speaks them, they are not oddities but home. Each word is a vessel carrying memory, shaped by centuries of use. If the language disappears, so to do those vessels, and memory spills into silence. Civilization is not only stone, it is also syllable, and syllables are more fragile than stone. Now imagine standing before a wall covered in glyphs. The lines are intricate, looping, curling like vines. You know they must mean something. They look like language, but you cannot read. This was the fate of Maya script until recently. Fact, for centuries, it baffled scholars. Many believed it to be purely symbolic, not true writing. Only in the 20th century did breakthroughs show that it recorded full speech histories, poems, laws. Suddenly, voices emerged from silence, kings and scribes speaking across 1,000 years. What had seemed mute was revealed as eloquent. Isn't that astonishing? How easily we mistake silence for absence, when meaning may only be sleeping. Open debate, some argue that other undeciphered scripts may yet yield. Linear A of Crete, Rongorongo of Easter Island, the symbols of the Indus. Others doubt, pointing out the scarcity of texts, the lack of bilinguals, the erosion of context. Without keys, without continuity, perhaps some voices will remain forever mute. But even that silence has power. It reminds you of limits, of humility, of how much is lost. Civilization is not a complete story. It is a mosaic with missing tiles. The gaps matter as much as the pieces. Perhaps you wonder why this matters. Why care about languages no one speaks, scripts no one reads? Because each is a memory system, a way of seeing the world. Lose a language, and you lose metaphors, categories, rhythms of thought. In one tongue, snow has 12 words. In another, kinship terms describe bonds unknown to others. Language is not only communication, it is perception. And when a language dies, a way of seeing dies with it. That is why linguists race to record endangered tongues, why archaeologists strain to read glyphs. They are not only saving words, they are saving worlds. Imagine yourself learning a word from an isolate. It sits on your tongue awkwardly, its sound unfamiliar. You repeat it, and slowly it feels natural. You realize you are speaking not only a word, but a memory carried for centuries. The sound connects you to people you have never met, to ancestors long gone. For a moment, the silence breaks. That is the gift of language. It bridges time, carrying thought across generations. Now breathe with that thought. Inhale, syllable formed. Exhale, syllable forgotten. Inhale, script carved. Exhale, script eroded. Your breath mirrors the rhythm of language, itself appearing, fading, returning in fragments. You, too, are part of that rhythm. You speak, you forget, you remember, you pass on. Civilization survives not because nothing is lost, but because enough is carried forward. So tonight, as you drift, let the silence of undeciphered scripts soothe you. They are not failures, they are mysteries. They remind you that memory is larger than understanding, that not all voices are meant to be heard again. Some remain whispers, carved in clay, etched in stone, waiting or perhaps content never to be read. And in their waiting, they remind you of humility, of patience, of the vastness of memory beyond reach. Civilization is not a single voice, but a chorus, and sometimes the most haunting part of a chorus is the note you cannot quite hear. You have stood before mute tablets, undeciphered glyphs, languages isolated like islands. Now the tide of memory carries you farther back before scripts, before seals, before even clay tablets, to a time when memory was carved not in words but in images, traced in ochre, etched in stone, painted on walls of caves. Tonight, let us wander into those earliest theaters of memory, where light from torches flickered on bison and deer, where human hands reached across darkness to leave marks, still visible tens of thousands of years later. Imagine yourself stepping into a cave. The air is cool, damp, heavy with silence. Your torch sputters, casting shadows that dance across rough walls. Then, as light steadies, figures emerge: horses, mammoths, lions, handprints. They seem to move in the flicker, as if alive. Fact: sites like Chauvet in France, Lascaux, Altamira, Sulawesi in Indonesia hold paintings dating back more than 30,000 years. Even older carving scratches, zigzags appear on bones and shells, some nearly 500,000 years old. These are not idle doodles. They are memory made visible, thought externalized, a hunter recalling prey, a shaman recalling visions, a parent teaching a child. The cave wall becomes the first canvas, the first library. Perhaps you ask, were these art or communication? Open debate. Some scholars argue they were rituals, magic to ensure a successful hunt. Others see them as teaching tools, instructions for survival. Still others suggest they were symbolic, reflections of myths, cosmologies, dreams. No consensus exists. The truth may be all of these, and that is the wonder. One painting can be instruction, prayer, and memory at once. Civilization does not need alphabet to store meaning. It needs intention, persistence, and surface. Now picture the hand stencils, so common across continents. A palm pressed to stone, pigment blown around it, leaving a ghostly outline. Fact: from Europe to Indonesia to South America, these hands appear, spanning tens of thousands of years. Why? Perhaps to mark presence. I was here, I lived. Perhaps to mark belonging. We were here, together. Perhaps as ritual, the hand itself a symbol of life, of touch, of continuity. Whatever the reason, the effect is powerful. As you gaze at the handprint, you realize you are looking not at an image of an animal or a symbol of a god, but at the direct trace of another human. Their hand, your hand, separated by millennia, yet touching through stone. Isn't that extraordinary? Consider also the abstract symbols, dots, lines, chevrons, spirals. Fact: some researchers catalogue over 30 recurring signs in cave art, suggesting they form a proto-symbolic system, perhaps even an early code. Hypothesis: could they represent seasons, migrations, counts of animals, phases of the moon? It is possible, or they may be purely decorative, born of aesthetic impulse, but their repetition across regions hints at meaning. They may be the ancestors of writing, seeds of script planted in pigment and stone. Civilization may have begun not with words but with patterns, repeated until they became memory anchors. Imagine again the torchlight flickering. A group gathers in the cave, eyes wide, listening to a storyteller. The figures on the wall are not silent to them. They are alive, animated by words, chants, gestures. The cave becomes theatre, lecture hall, temple. The paintings are cues, memory prompts for stories repeated across generations. When the storyteller is gone, the wall remains, ready for the next voice. In this way, the cave is not only decoration, it is continuity. It ensures that memory outlasts the teller. Now think of caves as wombs of civilization. Entering one is like returning to the earth, to darkness, to silence. To paint inside is to plant memory in the body of the world. When you leave, the mark stays hidden, safe, waiting. Fact: many caves were sealed naturally, preserving paintings untouched for tens of millennia. Some, perhaps, were abandoned deliberately, left as offerings. Each rediscovery today is like opening a time capsule. Torches of the present lighting. Torches of the past, Perhaps you ask, did those early artists know what they were doing? Did they know they were shaping memory? Hard to say, but they knew they wanted to remember, to mark, to connect, and that desire is enough. Civilization does not begin with perfection. It begins with the urge to keep something from vanishing. A handprint, a horse, a line of dots, these are fragments. But together they form the first archives. Picture yourself pressing your own hand against stone, breathing pigment over it. You step back, see the outline glow in torchlight. For a moment, you feel immortal. You know that long after you are gone, the hand will remain. Someone will see it, wonder, remember. That is civilization distilled. The refusal to vanish without trace. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, hand pressed. Exhale, pigment blown. Inhale, torch flares. Exhale, shadows dance. Your breath mirrors theirs, across tens of thousands of years. You are not separate. You are part of the same impulse, the same refusal to forget. You have wandered far, through drowned plains and star maps, through sealed temples and whispered myths, through undeciphered scripts and handprints, glowing in flickering torchlight. Each stop was a fragment, a point of light on the vast memory. Map, tonight, in this final chapter, let us gather those fragments together, weave them into a tapestry, and rest in the quiet knowledge that you are part of it too. For civilization is not a straight line, not a neat ascent, but a constellation broken, scattered, yet shining when seen as a whole. And you, listening here, are one of its cartographers. Picture again the drowned world of Doggerland, hunters crossing rivers now hidden beneath the North Sea. Their tools dredged up by modern fishermen whisper that land is never fixed, that seas rise and erase. Fact, geology confirms it, yet memory survives as flood myths. You connect that dot on the map. Then the circle of Göbekli Tepe, pillars carved with animals, then buried under rubble. Ritual closure, deliberate silence. That is another dot. Off Japan, Yonaguni lies underwater, its terraces uncertain, debated. Open debate, natural or human, its very ambiguity becomes memory, preserved in question. A third dot glows, now turned to Mithsa, flood of Gilgamesh, the lost Atlantis, the golden ages of Hindu Uyghurs. These are not only stories, they are echoes of disaster, nostalgia, longing. You add them as glowing arcs, binding the map together with threads of imagination. Look higher, to the stars tracked in stone and story. Solstice, light-piercing chambers, constellations sung as calendars. Fact, sky knowledge survives even when cities collapse. Another cluster of lights brightens the map. Beneath deserts, ancient rivers, in caves, handprints and animals painted 30 millennia ago. Even DNA itself, spiraled inside you, carries memory deeper than any archive. Each of these shines, and together they make a pattern. Perhaps you see now that the memory map is not neat like a modern atlas. It is uneven, incomplete, sometimes contradictory. Some fragments are facts, others hypotheses, others open debate. But isn't that exactly what memory is? A patchwork stitched by many hands, some careful, some hurried, some dreaming. The map is not less valuable because it is uncertain. It is more. Uncertainty keeps it alive, keeps you asking, keeps you searching. Civilization is not built from certainty alone. It is built from wonder. Imagine standing before this glowing tapestry. You trace the line from a handprint in Chauvet, to a glyph in Maya stone, from a myth of a flood to a sonar scan of a shelf, from a buried temple to a whispered lullaby. Each line is fragile, yet together they form something enduring. And then you notice there is a space waiting, empty, inviting. That is your place, for the map is not finished. It never will be. Each generation adds its fragment in idea, a song, a story, a gesture, and passes it on. You are doing so even now, by listening, by remembering, by wondering. Perhaps you ask, what is the purpose of such a map? Why carry fragments if they are incomplete? Because the act itself is meaning. To map is to resist forgetting. To remember is to honor. The map is not about perfection. It is about persistence. Civilization survives because people cared enough to leave handprints, carve pillars, sing myths, draw coastlines, bury temples, debate stones, pass on words. You are heir to all of that. And you too will pass something on, even if only a whisper, a gesture, a trace. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, fragment gathered. Exhale, fragment shared. Inhale, map brightening. Exhale, night deepening. The rhythm of breath is the rhythm of memory itself, peering, fading, returning. You are part of that rhythm, as much as the hunters of the builders of Göbekli Tepe, the sailors tracing stars. You are connected, even if you do not feel it daily. Tonight, you feel it. Now imagine this. The memory map is not only ancient, it extends forward to future generations will look back at you, at your songs, your cities, your stories. What will they remember? What fragments will survive? Perhaps not the skyscrapers, perhaps not the screens, but the hum of lullabies, the rhythm of meals, the touch of hands. Memory often skips grandeur and holds on to the humble. And so, in the end, you may realize, what you do gently may last longer than what you do loudly. That is not loss, it is grace. Let yourself drift into that grace now. Civilization is not only a chain of empires, but a field of stars, each light a fragment, some bright, some faint, some steady, some flickering. Together they form constellations, maps not of land but of meaning. You are lying beneath that sky of memory tonight, eyes closed, heart steady, breathing with the rhythm of all who came before. You are one more light, small but real, joining the constellation that is enough. And so, as this journey closes, listen to the quiet. No answers thunder, no final truth is handed down. Only silence, the silence of memory itself, loud and soft. At once, that silence is not empty, it is full of voices, of fragments, of hands, of stars. You have walked through it, you have listened, you have carried it, and now you can rest, knowing that memory is never truly lost. It may drown, burn, crumble, or fade, but it always leaves a trace, and those traces, when gathered, shine tonight. As you fall into sleep, imagine yourself as a cartographer of that shining. With every breath, you draw another line. With every dream, you add another fragment. With every memory, you keep civilization alive. The map glows softly around you. It does not end. It does not begin. It simply continues. Inhale, stars rising. Exhale, sea falling. Inhale, stories whispered. Exhale, silence enduring. You are here, you are part of it. And the world, remembering itself through you, says softly, good night. And Doggerland is only one piece. Around the world, continental shelves tell the same story. The Persian Gulf, once a broad plain of rivers, now holds oil fields deep below. The South China Sea covers valleys where streams once braided. Along the coasts of India, sonar scans hint at structures, though currents blur the lines. These are not certainties, only suggestions, patterns half glimpsed. Open debate, some researchers argue natural formations mimic architecture. Others insist human hands were there. Who is correct? It is hard to say, and perhaps the truth lies between. The sea both erases and preserves. Like a patient editor, it cuts scenes, rearranges, hides fragments for another day. You may be wondering why we do not hear more of these drowned lands. Partly because the work is costly. A trench on land requires brushes and trowels. A trench underwater requires submersibles, oxygen tanks, sonar, months of preparation. And even if something is found, skeptics are quick to dismiss. Careers can sink as easily as ruins. To argue for a pre-Sumerian city under the sea is to risk being branded speculative, unscientific. Safer to stay silent, safer to look elsewhere. Silence is its own kind of drowning. But imagine, just for a moment, that you could drain the seas like a bathtub, lower the water by 100 meters, reveal the shelves. What would you see? Coastlines twice as broad, river mouths far out to sea, caves once dry. Would you find stairways leading down? Would you see walls, markets, harbors, or only stone, wave sculpted, tricking the eye into patterns? Either way, the sight would be uncanny. A memory not your own, a world erased before your birth, yet still connected to you through the same soil, the same air. Perhaps this is what the ancients remembered when they told of floods, of gods punishing with water, of lands swallowed overnight. Perhaps those stories were not metaphors, but diaries, written in myth because there was no other language strong enough to carry grief. Tonight, let yourself think of how fragile land truly is. We walk on it, build on it, bury our dead in it, as though it were eternal. Yet the line between shore and sea is no more fixed than the line between sleep and waking. One storm, one melt, and the boundary shifts. And when it shifts, what do we lose? We lose not only walls and roads, but the memory of footsteps, the rhythm of markets, the laughter of children playing. A civilization drowned silently is not less real for its silence. Perhaps it is more real, because it reminds us that permanence is an illusion. You may picture now a village on a low plain, families gathering reeds, shaping them into mats, weaving nets. A man chisels a simple tool from bone. A woman kneads dough, bakes flatbread on hot stones. The smell rises. They are not kings or scribes, but their lives are the fibers of civilization. Then the sea creeps closer. First a few floods each spring, then a shoreline eroded, then fields waterlogged. Slowly, the people leave. Their huts sag, their fires go out. Waves claim the hearthstones. Centuries later, a trawler drags up a shard of pottery, the curve of a vessel still smooth beneath barnacles. For a moment, the past rises. Then it sinks again, back into silence. And so the geological layer is not just stone and water. It is the first page of our memory, the one we keep misplacing. You might say, but where are the cities? And I would answer, maybe they never rose, or maybe they did and fell, and the sea took them before they could teach us. Either way, the drowned shelf reminds us that the map of civilization has erasures, not blank spots, but smudges where ink once lay. And like any faded parchment, we must read between the lines. Tonight, as you listen, you may feel your own breath rising and falling like the tide. Think of each inhale as a land revealed, each exhale as a coast drowned. In this rhythm lies the memory of the earth itself. Civilizations may come and go, but the breath remains, the water flows, the map redraws itself endlessly. And perhaps that is enough, for memory does not need to be complete to be powerful. A fragment can carry a whole world. A shard of pottery can conjure a village. A reed mat can remind us of markets long vanished. What we call civilization may be nothing more than this: the art of remembering fragments, the stubborn refusal to let silence win. So let the sea rise in your imagination. Let the plains sink. Let the drowned world become part of your dream. You will not solve the riddle tonight. You do not need to. It is enough to float with the question: if the first civilizations drowned silently, what else might we be forgetting, even now? And as that question settles, like silt in still water, your mind too can settle, drifting into rest, into quiet, into the slow tide of memory. You are still drifting, and now the tide of memory carries you, not beneath the waves, but onto the dry soil of forgotten hills. Picture yourself standing where the land rises gently, the air cool before dawn, the ground dotted with low stone enclosures. They are not palaces, not cities, but something older, something stranger. Long before the plough carved straight lines across fields, long before farmers tethered oxen to wooden yokes, hands were already lifting pillars, carving circles, aligning spaces to the path of the sun. Fact, archaeologists call one of these places Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey and date it to nearly 12,000 years ago. It is older than farming, older than pottery. The people who gathered there still hunted gazelle, still foraged for wild grains, still roamed the valleys. Yet they raised towering stones, carved with foxes, vultures, and serpents. Why? For ritual, for community, for memory. The answer is uncertain, and perhaps it is meant to remain so. As you breathe, imagine the smell of dust and sweat, the scrape of stone against stone, the sound of mallets striking. A man crouches to chisel a groove no wider than a fingernail. The dust clings to his skin, the rhythm steady. He is not a king, not a priest, not a name that will be recorded. He is simply a craftsman, working by torchlight. Can you feel the patience in his hands? He may not know that farming will soon change everything, but he knows the difference between a line true and a line crooked. Civilization, in its earliest form, may have begun not in grand declarations, but in the humble precision of a groove. Perhaps, you ask, how could hunters and gatherers, who lacked permanent villages, raise such monuments? Where did they find the time, the labor, the skill? That is the riddle. Some hypotheses suggest that the shared effort itself created cohesion, that ritual gatherings built community strong enough to sustain the leap toward farming. Others propose that the inspiration came from story streams of ancestors, gods, or stars that demanded form in stone. Which is right, it is hard to say. But the fact remains, the stones exist, older than fields, older than bread ovens. Standing in silence, their carvings as sharp as whispers. You may find it odd that temples came before farms. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't agriculture give rise to surplus, surplus to settlement, settlement to temples? That is the neat order we were taught. Yet the ground tells a messier story. It suggests that belief, ritual, or the need to gather may have come first, that perhaps humans needed meaning before they needed bread. Perhaps the gathering place itself gave birth to the village. Imagine it, people coming season after season to circle the stones, bringing offerings, sharing hunts, exchanging seeds. In the shadow of pillars, they lingered. In lingering, they planted. And once you plant, the cycle begins. In this way, a temple may have fathered a farm. Let yourself picture the life of those gatherings. Fires flickering against carved animals. Smoke rising into cold stars. Someone sings, a low chant that others join, the melody weaving like a net. Children play at the edges, tossing bones, laughing. Women grind wild grain, the sound of stone against stone like distant waves. A hunter shows his wounds, earned in pursuit of gazelle. A storyteller gestures at the carvings, naming them with meanings lost to us now. These are not kings or scribes, but their acts were seeds of memory. Perhaps this is civilization, not the city, but the circle, not the tablet, but the tale. There is something moving in realizing that memory can be older than farming. Think of it, you may plant a seed for food, but you may also plant a pillar for story. Both root into the earth, both demand care, both outlast the hand that placed them. Which is more essential? The answer shifts like smoke, but the question itself is nourishment. Tonight, as you listen, you are tending such a seed. Consider how strange it is that we often dismiss rituals as superstitions, yet they may have been the scaffolding of survival. A feast, a song, a stone circle, these may have bound people together, kept them returning, kept them remembering. Without that bond, farming might never have been tried, or might have failed without persistence. Open debate, some scholars suggest that megaliths were observatories, calendars in stone tracking solstices and equinoxes. Others argue they were places of burial, of communion with ancestors. Both explanations may be true. Both recognize the need to mark time, to face the unknown with structure. When you lose track of seasons, hunger follows. When you lose track of the dead, grief unravels. The stones solved both. Now picture yourself again as the craftsman, crouched with chisel and hammer. Each tap is small, but together they shape a pillar that will stand for millennia. You do not think of history. You think of the angle of light, the sound of the groove. Your hands sting, but you continue. And in the persistence of making, civilization breathes. It does not arrive like Athena from Zeus, fully formed. It arrives like dust, gathering grain by grain, settling until it becomes earth, until others stand on it and build anew. You may wonder what those people ate when not building. Imagine flatbread from crushed wild barley, roasted gazelle, handfuls of nuts. Imagine cheese, strained through clay sieves, tangy and new. Did you know that someone was already making cheese thousands of years before Uruk's walls? It feels almost comic, doesn't it, that the taste of dairy may outlast dynasties. Yet it grounds the story. Civilization is not only monuments and myths, it is flavors passed on, meals shared, children fed. That continuity is its own temple. So tonight, as you lie still, think of the paradox. Temples before fields, monuments before villages, meaning before bread. It unsettles the neat order, but perhaps that is the point. Perhaps civilization was never about efficiency. Perhaps it was always about memory, the memory of stars, of ancestors, of stories carved into stone. And perhaps that memory needed form before food. You cannot be sure, none of us can, but the possibility lingers like a soft wind through tall grass. Let that wind move through you now. Breathe in as though you are standing among those stones. Breathe out as though you are dusting soil from your hands. Inhale, a chant rising. Exhale, a line carved true. The rhythm is the same as theirs, for breath is the first and last tool of memory. You carry it with you even as the questions remain unanswered. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. As you rest deeper now, let us move from stone circles to another kind of monument, one less enduring, one made not of limestone but of words. Civilization is built as much from voices as from walls, and voices leave fragile traces. Imagine shelves of folded bark, stacks of bamboo strips, scrolls of papyrus, stacks of clay tablets drying in the sun. They are light, brittle, flammable. They can vanish in a night. Fact, we know of libraries that once stood proud, filled with thousands of volumes, only to vanish in Alexandria's scrolls. The Maya codices, the texts burned under Qin. Shi Huang, fact, even the conquistador, Diego de Landa, when he saw Maya books filled with glyphs and stars, wrote that they contained lies of the devil, and he burned them all. For codices survive, just 4. Can you imagine how small a fraction that is? How many voices were silenced? If civilization is memory, then book burning is amnesia by fire. Picture yourself standing in one of those libraries before the flames. A scribe bends over parchment, dipping a brush in ink. The air smells of resin, of oil, of faint dust. He copies a hymn, a star chart, a myth. He hums as he works, the rhythm of words steady. Around him, shelves stretch upward, filled with thought. The room is a hive of murmurs, footsteps, whispered prayers. Now picture the same room hours later, smoke thick, scrolls curling, ashes drifting like snow. The voices are gone. The words will never be read again. The silence is heavy, absolute. That silence is not only absence, it is a kind of drowning. Memory, submerged not in water but in fire. Yet not all memory dies with paper. When books burn, songs remain. When scripts vanish, rituals persist. A people may lose their written language, but they may still gather at solstice to light fires, to sing, to trace stars with fingers. That too is memory. Oral traditions, stories carried by voice, can span centuries. Open debates, scholars argue about how long oral memory can truly last. Generations, centuries, millennia. Hard to measure, but some myths describe floods, volcanoes, ice, events that geological evidence later confirms. Perhaps memory is more stubborn than we give it credit for. Perhaps it whispers across ages even without ink. Imagine an elder singing to children around a fire. The story is long, winding, filled with symbols. The children grow sleepy, yet they remember the rhythm, the refrain. Years later, they sing it to their own children. The details shift, but the core survives. Is that not civilization too? A chain of sound binding centuries. Consider the chants of Polynesian navigators, mapping stars and swells with syllables, guiding canoes across oceans. Or the seasonal songs of farmers, calling out which constellation signals planting time. The sky itself becomes a library, one that cannot be burned. When you look up at the stars, you are reading the same pages they once read. Tonight, let yourself wonder about the fragility of memory. A library can vanish in flame, but a tune hummed in the dark may outlast empires. A ritual gesture, a hand lifted to the east, A stone placed at dawn may persist long after the reason is forgotten. That persistence is curious. Why do we keep repeating things we no longer understand? Perhaps repetition itself is the meaning. The act of doing keeps the memory alive, even when the story fades. When you kneel, when you sing, when you mark a calendar with a stone, you participate in memory older than writing. Now, picture a festival in a village long before Sumer. People gather at dusk, carrying torches. They paint their bodies with clay, wear feathers, beat drums. The air is alive with smoke and laughter. They circle, they chant, they dance until stars rise. A child watches, eyes wide. He does not yet know why they do this, but he knows that he must remember the steps. One day he will teach them to another child. The ritual is not entertainment, it is archive. Every spin, every drumbeat, every chant is a line in a living book. If the village is washed away, if the fields vanish, the memory will still survive in the dance. Perhaps you have noticed that civilizations often tie memory to the sacred. They do not preserve shopping lists in temples. They carve hymns, calendars, myths. Why? Because sacredness ensures repetition. You do not forget what you fear or revere. You repeat it. You sing it every year, every season, every sunrise. That is why myths endure longer than facts. Myths are sticky, facts fragile. And so memory is encoded not in what is true, but in what is meaningful. Meaning is the glue that binds generations. Truth alone is brittle. Let us pause here and consider DNA itself. Fact, within every cell of your body lies a record, not of words but of sequences, molecules carrying instructions from ancestors stretching back millions of years. DNA is not history in the usual sense, but it is memory in the deepest sense. It whispers of migrations, of minglings, of long-lost cousins. Some scientists call it a time capsule, one that survives even when books burn, even when songs fade. Isn't that remarkable? Even if a library burns, even if a temple falls, you carry memory in your blood, in the quiet spiral inside each cell. Civilization may forget, but the body remembers so tonight. Let yourself drift on this thought. Memory is fragile, but also resilient. It can drown, it can burn, it can crumble, but it can also hide in song, in ritual, in genes. A fragment of pottery, a melody, a scar in stone each, is a line in the book of humanity. We are never without memory. We only misplace it, bury it, ignore it. And sometimes, when the time is right, we find it again. A codex rescued from fire, a myth retold, a sequence decoded. Each rediscovery is like surfacing after being underwater too long, gasping for air, realizing the past is still with us. As you breathe now, feel that rhythm again. Inhale like a chant rising. Exhale like ashes falling. Inhale like stars appearing. Exhale like pages turning. You are part of this rhythm, part of this fragile, stubborn memory. And perhaps that is all civilization is. The refusal to forget completely, the insistence on carrying fragments forward, no matter the cost. Let that thought settle into you like a lullaby. Let it soothe you, for even as books burn, memory endures. And as long as it endures, you are never alone. Now you find yourself walking slowly across a high plateau, the air thin, the light sharp, the ground scattered with blocks of stone that seem too neat to be natural, yet too silent to explain themselves. Imagine standing before one of these stones, taller than you, carved into a shape so precise it feels almost modern. The edges are straight, the grooves narrow, the angles perfect. You reach out a hand and trace the line of a groove, and it is so clean, so true, that your fingertip hesitates. How could hands thousands of years ago, without steel, without machinery, have carved such edges? Fact sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia or the H-blocks scattered across the Andean plateau raise this question. Their cuts in interlocking forms puzzling even to seasoned archaeologists. And yet, the answers remain elusive, balanced between skill and time, between patience and mystery. Perhaps you imagine the workers of that age, crouched with stone hammers, with sand and rope, grinding day after day, week after week, until grooves emerged. Hypothesis: with enough time, with enough effort, even the hardest stone can be worn into shape. Sand, water, and patience can make a saw. The precision, then, would not be evidence of lost machines, but of relentless persistence. Picture them, generations passing chisels to sons and daughters, hands blistered, eyes weary, slowly shaping a block into a puzzle piece that would fit another. There is nobility in that patience, in the stubborn refusal to give up on an idea. Civilization may be nothing more than that, persistence etched into stone. But then again, you step back and look at the scale. The blocks are enormous, weighing tons, their surfaces cut so flat they could join without mortar, their right angles sharper than the blade of a modern square. Open debate: could such precision really be achieved with simple tools? Some scholars argue yes, pointing to experiments showing that stone can be ground smooth with enough labor. Others shake their heads, noting that the tolerance is within millimeters, difficult to imagine without metal. Both views persist, neither silenced, neither victorious. And perhaps that is the lesson. The stones remain, the debate continues. The truth is slippery, like light reflecting off polished rock as you stand there in your mind's eye. The wind whistling across the plateau, you might feel a quiet awe, not because you are convinced of hidden technology or vanished machines, but because the stones themselves are stubborn evidence of human ambition. Whether carved with ropes and sand or with tools now forgotten, they embody the same desire to make the earth answer to vision, to take what is hard and resistive and shape it into order. That desire is ancient, as old as the hand that smoothed a stick into a spear, as old as the voice that shaped sound into song. The stones are only its larger echo. Let yourself imagine the site as it once may have been. Walls rising, plazas filled with people, rituals performed beneath the open sky. The stones not scattered but aligned, humming with purpose. Fires burning in niches, offerings laid at the feet of statues. The air filled with smoke, with prayer, with the heartbeat of drums. And then, slowly or suddenly, silence. The stones topple, or are left unfinished, or are covered with earth. Centuries pass, the people move on, the memory fades, until one day explorers, scholars, wanderers stand where you now stand, scratching their heads, marveling, arguing. The stones do not explain, they only endure. Maybe this is the true role of such sites, to challenge certainty. They whisper, yes, we were here, but they do not say how or why. They force you to sit with mystery, to admit the limits of knowledge. Isn't that what civilization needs, too? Not just answers, but humility. The humility to say, I do not know, but I will keep asking. These stones are not textbooks. They are questions carved into rock. And questions, unlike answers, do not crumble with time. Now imagine yourself crouching beside one of those grooves, your ear pressed close. You almost expect to hear something, the echo of hammer blows, the murmur of voices, the rush of time itself, but the groove is silent. You realize the sound you hear is your own breath, moving in and out, as steady as the chisel's rhythm once was. In that moment, the past feels close, not because you solved its riddle, but because you recognized its humanity. You breathe, they breathe. You wonder, they wondered. The line between then and now thins, as clean as the groove beneath your fingers. Tonight, let yourself rest in that recognition. Precision is not only about tools, it is about intention. Whether with bronze chisels, stone hammers, or something else entirely, the makers intended these stones to last, to speak, to challenge, and they do. Thousands of years later, across oceans and languages, they still make you pause, still make you ask. That is a kind of success no ruler, no empire can claim. Empires fall, stones endure, questions linger. Perhaps you were tempted to demand an answer. Were the stones natural, shaped by fracture and erosion? Or were they deliberate, carved by hands with techniques now lost? The truth may be a blend. Nature sets the stage, humans refine it, time disguises it. The line between natural and artificial is not always clear. A crack may become a groove may be sharpened by intention. What matters is not which side is right, but that the stones invite you into the tension between. That tension is fertile. It keeps the memory alive. And so, as you lie there now, think of those stones not as puzzles to be solved, but as companions in unknowing. They are heavy, yes, but their weight is not only physical, it is the weight of questions carried across ages. To touch them is to feel the burden of memory, the stubborn refusal of the past to fit neatly into categories. And maybe that is why they linger in your thoughts tonight. They remind you that civilization is not neat. It is jagged, debated, half-carved, sometimes unfinished. Yet it endures, groove by groove, line by line, question by question. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, as if pulling dust from stone. Exhale, as if smoothing a groove. Inhale, as if lifting a block. Exhale, as if setting it in place. Your breath is their rhythm, your rest their silence. And as the stones wait in the high plateau, so too you can wait, without rushing to conclusion, without forcing certainty. The mystery is not a problem, it is a lullaby. Let it soothe you now. Now imagine yourself drifting down through water so clear it seems like glass at first, then slowly clouded by particles that shimmer like dust in a beam of sunlight. You are sinking gently, not with fear, but with wonder, as if the sea itself is carrying you to a memory it has kept hidden. The light bends and ripples above you, and below, shapes begin to appear. At first they seem like terraces, steps cut into stone platforms stretching outward, a slope that looks almost like a road. Fish move through the corridors as though they are guardians, weaving between the lines. You blink, uncertain. Are you seeing architecture or only geology? Open debate, this is the riddle of sites like the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan, where divers have argued for decades about whether the formations are natural sandstone shaped by tectonic fractures or deliberate constructions left by hands long forgotten. As you hover there, suspended, the water cool against your skin, you notice the angles. They seem to clean, too right-angled to be accidental. A corner here, a flat wall there, grooves that look deliberate. And yet, when you reach out, the surface crumbles like ordinary rock, soft to the touch, eroded by waves. Perhaps nature herself is the sculptor, and you are only a mind too eager to find patterns. Hypothesis: humans see faces in clouds, animals in constellations, gods in storms. Why not temples in stone shaped by the sea? The brain is a machine for meaning, and sometimes it gives us more than the world intends. But still, you hesitate, because sometimes the sea does preserve what humans once made. Fact: archaeologists have found submerged settlements in the Mediterranean, streets and walls now inhabited by fish. Off the coast of India, sonar scans revealed what might be foundations, though evidence is contested. In the Black Sea, divers have discovered drowned villages, their timbers preserved in oxygen-poor depths. The possibility is not absurd. The sea does not only erase, it sometimes keeps. And so Yonaguni, or places like it, may not be illusions entirely. They may be fragments, half natural, half shaped, caught in the slow collaboration of human ambition and ocean patience. Picture yourself swimming closer. Your hand brushes the edge of a stair, the step wide enough for a person to stand, yet no one has stood here for thousands of years, if ever. A school of silver fish darts past, scattering like sparks. The silence is immense, broken only by the sound of your breath, bubbles rising, echoing against stone. In that echo, you almost hear voices, chants, footfalls, the murmur of a crowd. Or perhaps you hear only your own heartbeat, magnified by depth. You cannot be sure, and that uncertainty is the essence of the place. It is neither wholly one thing nor wholly another. It is a question carved in water. Consider for a moment the courage it takes to study such places. Divers descending with cameras, geologists measuring angles, archaeologists debating, all under the shadow of ridicule. To claim you have found a pre-Ice Age city is to risk being dismissed, even ruined. Careers are delicate. Funding is fragile. The academic sea can drown as surely as the physical one. And so many stay silent, many hesitate, many wait for others to speak first. Meanwhile, the monument were the natural or made weights as well. Indifferent, enduring. Let yourself drift along the platform. Look at the fish weaving in and out of crevices, their scales flashing like coins. Imagine that these fish are the citizens now, their bodies the only movement, their schools the only processions. The city, if it ever was one, has new inhabitants. And isn't that fitting? Civilization is never permanent. One day it belongs to us, another day to the waves, another day to coral and fish. The sea is patient. The sea always wins. And yet, we insist on remembering, insisting on asking. That insistence is our own kind of tide. Perhaps this is why myths speak of floods and drowned lands. Atlantis, the city swallowed by the sea. Floods in Mesopotamian epics, in Hindu texts, in Native American stories. Open debate were these tales, allegories of moral failing, or were they memories of real events, seas, collapsing ice dams, sudden floods? We cannot know for certain. But when you float above Yonaguni, when you picture streets beneath waves, you feel the echo of those myths. You realize that myth is not only story, it is also storage, a way of keeping memory alive when writing is fragile, when stone can crumble. Myths may be the only maps that survive drowning. Now, as you rise slowly back toward the surface, let yourself imagine the last people here, if there were any. Did they see the water creeping higher year after year? Did they hold rituals on these platforms, begging the sea to stop? Did they abandon the place in silence, carrying only fragments of memory inland? Or was this never human at all, only nature's geometry misread by our hungry eyes? Either way, the sea holds the secret, and she does not rush to tell it. Your breath is steady now, in and out, like waves against stone. Inhale, the sea recedes. Exhale, the sea returns. Inhale, light sharpens on terraces. Exhale, shadows blur the steps. This rhythm is the truth behind all submerged memory. Nothing is permanent, nothing is fixed. Whether Yonaguni is temple or tectonic accident, its gift is the same. It teaches you to wonder. It invites you to rest inside uncertainty, to float with questions rather than sink under answers. And so tonight, as you lie still, let the image of that underwater monument settle into your mind. Terraces, platforms, fish gliding through corridors of stone. Silence, heavy, light fractured, a city that may never have been, and yet feels as real as any you have walked. That is the power of memory and of imagination. They blur the line between what is and what was, between the certain and the possible. Let yourself drift there, unafraid, comforted by the knowledge that even the sea cannot drown questions. They rise like bubbles, always rising, always reaching the surface. Where you wait, you are breathing evenly now, your body still, your mind drifting. The tide of memory has carried you through drowned lands, through stone circles, through burned libraries, and even into the quiet corridors of the sea. But what remains? What lessons can you hold in your hand, fragile but steady as you close? Your eyes, if civilization is memory, then how did people keep it alive when books were ash, when cities fell, when waves erased shorelines? Tonight, let us wander through 3 quiet methods, 3 tools older than kings and younger than the stars, oral maps, solar architecture, and everyday objects. None are grand in themselves, yet together they form a net strong enough to carry memory forward. Imagine first the oral map. Before charts, before compasses, before satellites, people carried the earth inside their mouths. They memorized rivers, mountains, reefs, and routes as stories, songs, chants. Fact, Polynesian navigators crossed vast oceans, guided only by stars, swells, bird flights, and the rhythm of words passed from master to apprentice. An island was not coordinates, but a verse, a rhythm of waves recited until the canoe reached land. In deserts, Bedouins sang routes from oasis to oasis, their voices guiding them where landmarks were few. Even in Europe, old ballads hid directions in rhyme, naming ridges and streams along the way. To speak a map was to keep a landscape alive. Even when a drought dried a river, the name remained, like a ghost on the tongue, ensuring it would not be forgotten. Picture yourself learning such a map. An elder leans close, whispering, "From the stone that looks like a sleeping camel, walk until the sun sets twice, then turn where the grass grows thin." You repeat it again and again until it becomes part of your breath. It is not just instruction, it is rhythm, a melody you can hum under your breath while walking. Civilization may look like stone towers, but often it rests on songs. You can sing your way across a desert. If you can chant yourself home across an ocean, you are carrying the world inside you. That is survival. That is memory. Now think of solar architecture, the second lesson. Fact, across the world, ancient sites align with solstices and equinoxes. Stonehenge in England, Chaco Canyon in the Americas, temples in Egypt all mark the dance of the sun. At Newgrange in Ireland, Dawn on the winter solstice sends a shaft of light into a dark chamber, illuminating spirals carved in stone, thousands of years old, and yet the sun still finds the mark each year. Isn't that astonishing? A people, without written calendars, without atomic clocks, nonetheless etched time into architecture. The building became a clock, a reminder that the world had rhythm, that the seasons would return, that life could be predicted and planned. Imagine you were part of such a gathering. The night is cold. People wait outside a mound, silent, breath misting in the air. Then, as dawn breaks, a ray of sunlight pierces the passage, flooding the chamber with gold. Gasps, whispers, tears. The sun has returned. Crops will grow again. This ritual is not only celebration, it is memory. The stone remembers when words falter. Even if generations forget the reason, they still gather, still witness, still carry the rhythm forward. Hypothesis: perhaps some builders understood celestial cycles deeply. Perhaps others only followed traditions passed down. Either way, the result is the same. Memory etched not in ink, but in light and shadow. The third lesson lies in everyday tools, humble objects that outlast grandeur. A pot, a spindle, a loom, a plough. Fact: archaeologists find these in abundance, and though they may seem mundane, they are repositories of culture. A pot carries the shape of a hand, the curve of a tradition. A loom records the patterns of a people's stories. A plough holds the rhythm of fields, of planting and harvest. Everyday objects preserve memory not because they are sacred, but because they are repeated endlessly. You can forget a law. You cannot forget how to bake bread. You can forget a dynasty. You cannot forget how to spin thread. Daily acts are the quiet archivists of civilization. Picture a woman grinding grain on a stone quern. The sound is steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Children play nearby, listening without listening, absorbing the rhythm. One day, they too will grind, and the rhythm will continue. No one writes it down, yet it is never lost. Civilization depends not only on kings and priests, but on such repetitions, humble and constant. If memory is fragile, repetition is glue. And everyday tools are repetition embodied. So what do these three lessons tell you as you lie here tonight? They whisper that civilization does not only survive in monuments or books. It survives in voices, in light, in objects held and used. It survives in the ordinary, the repeated, the trusted. Oral maps keep the land alive when charts are gone. Solar alignments keep time alive when calendars are forgotten. Everyday tools keep culture alive when temples collapse. Together, they form a braided rope of memory, strong enough to cross centuries, strong enough to reach you now. Perhaps you wonder, are these lessons still relevant? You hold a phone that can map continents, a clock that measures seconds, machines that bake bread at the press of a button. Do you still need songs, solstice markers, stone quans? Maybe not for survival, but perhaps for memory. Because when machines fail, when pages burn, when seas rise, what remains are the rhythms we carry inside us. The song you hum, the shadow you watch, the bread you need. These cannot be erased so easily. They endure in hands, in hearts, in habits. So tonight, breathe with that thought. Inhale as though singing a map. Exhale as though turning with the sun. Inhale as though grinding grain. Exhale as though sharing bread. This rhythm is yours, but it is also theirs, the rhythm of ancestors, who kept memory alive without books, without walls, without certainty. And maybe that is the deepest lesson. Memory does not need permanence to endure. It only needs repetition, trust, and care. Let yourself drift into that rhythm now, comforted by the thought that even in forgetting, we remember, even in silence, we carry songs. Civilization is not fragile glass. It is woven rope, braided from voices, light, and tools. And that rope stretches backward beyond Sumer, beyond cities, into the darkness where people still remembered without writing, still built without farming, still carried maps in their mouths, calendars in their stones, and stories in their hands. Tonight, you hold that rope gently. As you drift into sleep, you have walked through drowned plains, stood before carved stones, listened to songs that carry across centuries, and touched the quiet persistence of everyday tools. All these fragments, swirled together, not neat, not complete, but enough to form something larger. Tonight, let us imagine that what we have gathered is not a list of sites, not a chronology of events, but a map and atlas, not of rivers and borders, but of memory itself. A memory map. Can you see it? Can you feel it? It stretches before you. Like parchment woven from mist, glowing faintly, each fragment you have encountered shimmering as a point of light. Here one light glows for Doggerland, the drowned plain beneath the North Sea, where hunters once crossed rivers that no longer exist. Another light flickers where Göbekli Tepe's pillars rise, animals etched in stone long before farmers sowed. Seed, farther south, a cluster glimmers where libraries once stood, now only ashes, but still remembered. Off the coast of Japan, a dim blue glow marks Yonaguni, uncertain whether natural or human, but still a question worth holding. And scattered between are softer lights, the hum of grinding stones, the taste of early cheese, the rhythm of oral maps sung into the night. This is not a map you will find in any textbook. It is stitched from memory, myth, and fragments, fragile yet luminous. Perhaps you wonder what such a map is for. Why trace memories if they are incomplete? Why wander through uncertainty? The answer may be this. A map is not only for knowing where you are, it is also for remembering where you have been and imagining where you could go. A memory map is not about precision. It is about connection. It tells you that even when the past is drowned or burned, it is not gone. It lingers in fragments, waiting to be linked. Civilization may not be a straight line of progress, but a constellation of lights across a dark sky. You do not need every star to navigate. A few are enough. Imagine holding this map in your hands. It is warm, almost alive, pulsing faintly with voices you cannot quite hear. You trace your finger from one glow to another, and each pulse tells a story. The drowned village where children once played, the circle of stone where hunters gathered, the chant that guided a canoe across an endless sea, the pot that carried grain through hunger. These are not separate. They form threads, weaving a fabric stronger than any single monument. That fabric is civilization itself, fragile and enduring at once, stitched together not by certainty but by care. Now let yourself consider your own place on this map. Where would your fragment glow? Is it the lullaby your grandmother sang words you may not fully understand but still hum at night? Is it the recipe handed down, bread kneaded with gestures older than memory? Is it the story told about your hometown, of a flood, a famine, a wandering hero? Each of us carries a fragment. You do too. Civilization is not only what is carved in stone or written in clay. It is what you remember, what you repeat, what you pass on. Without your fragment, the map is incomplete. Perhaps you smile at this thought. It may seem small, one song, one recipe, one story, but smallness does not mean insignificance. Fact. Archaeologists often say that the most common finds are the most important. Shards of pottery, scraps of bone, broken tools. They tell more about daily life than golden statues ever could. In the same way, your fragment, humble and personal, may one day be the thread that someone else picks up. Memory does not need grandeur to matter. It needs continuity. It needs care. So tonight, as you listen, I invite you to imagine adding your fragment to the memory map. Picture yourself placing it gently, like a candle on a vast altar. The light flares briefly, then steadies, joining the constellation. With your fragment, the map grows. With each fragment, it brightens. Civilization is not only the work of kings and architects, it is the sum of countless hands placing small lights into the dark. That is why the map shines, not because of a few great monuments, but because of many quiet contributions. And here is the invitation. When you wake, when you return to your world, notice your fragment. What song will you remember? What gesture will you repeat? What story will you tell? Each act is small, but each act is memory, and when you share it, you extend the map. Perhaps someone far away, someone you will never meet, will light their fragment because of yours. In that way, memory travels, not only through books and stones, but through lives. Let yourself drift further now. The memory map hovers above you, a glowing sky of fragments, some bright, some faint, some steady, some flickering. You recognize patterns. This cluster resembles a river valley. That one looks like a temple. Another looks like a line of footprints crossing the sea. You realize it is not only a map of the past, it is also a mirror of yourself, of your own need to remember, to connect, to belong. Civilization is not something you inherit passively. It is something you carry actively, like breath. Inhale, the memory comes to you. Exhale, you pass it on. Perhaps you worry, what if fragments are lost? What if lights go out? But even when some fade, others remain. And sometimes, fragments thought lost resurface. A shard unearthed, a chant rediscovered, a story remembered. The map is never fixed, never complete, but always alive. That is its beauty. A rigid map would break. A living map bends, adapts, endures. Civilization is like that, imperfect, incomplete, yet resilient. And so, as this first act draws to a close, rest with the knowledge that you are part of this map. You walk paths carved by others. You carry songs sung by ancestors. You add your own fragment to the weave. Whether you know it or not, you are a cartographer of memory, drawing lines across the darkness, keeping civilization alive, not with certainty, but with care. That is enough. More than enough. Breathe with that thought now. Inhale, a fragment remembered. Exhale, a fragment shared. Inhale, the map brightening. Exhale, the night deepening. The rhythm is steady, soothing. The map glows softly. Above you, patient, waiting, welcoming. And as you close your eyes, you realize that civilization, like sleep, is not an end but a continuation. Always fading, always returning, always remembered, always remade. And tonight, you are part of its quiet cartography. You have traced the memory map, glowing softly across time, stitched together from drowned plains and whispered songs. Now the tide of thought carries you toward the more familiar terrain of history. the kind usually told in textbooks, empires rising, kings crowned, wars fought, palaces built. These are the fireworks of civilization, bright but brief, dazzling but fragile. You have read of them, heard of them, perhaps even walked through their ruins. Yet beneath every throne is a foundation far older, far quieter. Tonight, let us drift between the loud and the silent, between the empire and the village, between the monument and the fragment. The contrast itself is instructive. Imagine Rome, its streets thrumming with carts, its aqueducts arcing across valleys, its senate filled with debate. Imagine Babylon, its ziggurats piercing the sky, its markets loud with traders from distant lands. Imagine the Maya carving glyphs into stone, their observatories charting the movements of Venus. Each of these shines in memory as a pinnacle, a height of culture and power. But ask yourself, where are they now? Rome is ruins beneath. Ivy, Babylon is sand, the Maya's libraries turned to ash. Their grandeur lasted centuries, but silence lasts longer. Fact, archaeologists measure that most cities, even mighty capitals, survive in glory only a fraction of the time that small villages endure. A village may live for thousands of years, evolving quietly, while empires burn out like sparks. Why is this so? Perhaps because the fireworks are too bright, consuming their fuel too quickly. Or perhaps because memory does not cling to conquest as tightly as to continuity. A potsherd tells more than a coronation. A spindle whirl speaks louder than a decree. Civilization may appear to be built on emperors, but in truth it rests on farmers, weavers, midwives, storytellers, people whose names are not written but whose rhythms persist. Without them, the fireworks never ignite. With them, the foundation remains even after the spectacle fades. Picture yourself in one of those great cities at its height. The air smells of bread and smoke, the streets crowded, voices overlapping. Banners hang from walls, soldiers march in step, scribes scratch tablets, priests intone prayers. It feels invincible, eternal. And yet you know, as you wander its avenues, that time waits patiently. Fires, floods, invasions, collapses come eventually. And when they do, what remains? Not the banners, not the decrees, but the potsherds, the bones, the humble tools. The city fades, but the memory of daily life lingers. This is the quiet paradox. The loudest parts of civilization are the least enduring, the quietest, the most resilient. Perhaps you ask, then why do we remember kings at all? Why not only the farmers? Because stories need heroes, and power writes itself louder than patience. The chronicles carved in stone celebrate battles, not bread. Yet even within those chronicles, silences whisper. Lists of kings stretch back impossibly far, like the Sumerian king list, where rulers before the flood are said to have reigned for thousands of years each. Open debate, are these exaggerated dynasties symbolic metaphors for memory itself, or distorted echoes of something older? Hard to say, but the point is clear. Even empires, in their loudest moments, looked backward to something deeper, something they sensed had come before. They sought legitimacy not by claiming to be new, but by claiming to inherit from a past already ancient. So tonight, as you lie still, reflect on this irony. The civilizations we call first often told stories of civilizations before them. Sumerians spoke of antediluvian kings. Egyptians told of golden ages under gods. The Greeks dreamed of Atlantis, a city drowned long before their own. Each empire, even at its height, carried a shadow memory of something earlier, something greater, something lost. Whether those memories were myths, metaphors, or garbled histories hardly matters. What matters is the persistence of longing, the intuition that what we know is only a fragment of what once was. Now picture yourself outside the city, in a small village, perhaps ignored by scribes. The huts are modest, the fires small, the fields tended by families. No fireworks, no chronicles. Yet here, life endures quietly, generation after generation. A child learns to spin wool. Another learns to shape clay. Songs are sung, tools repaired, bread baked, seeds planted. Nothing remarkable, and yet this is the true backbone of civilization. The city may rise and fall, but the village hums on. If civilization is memory, the village is its heartbeat. Think of fireworks again. They explode, dazzle, vanish, leaving only smoke. Villages are like candles, small, steady, enduring. Which light guides you better in darkness? Which warms you longer? Perhaps both are needed. Fireworks to inspire, candles to sustain, but never mistake the spark for the flame. Civilization endures not because of spectacle, but because of repetition, patience, continuity. That is the lesson beneath the ruins. As you breathe now, let yourself compare these two rhythms. The rapid heartbeat of empire, the slow breath of village. Inhale, fireworks flare. Exhale, candles burn. Inhale, banners wave. Exhale, bread rises. Both are civilization, but only one endures beyond collapse. When you study history, remember to look beneath the noise. There you will find the fragments, the quiet, the resilient. And so, as Act 2 begins, you are invited to listen less to the shouts of kings and more to the whispers of memory. Fireworks fade quickly, but whispers linger. They thread through generations, through myths, through tools, through rituals. Civilization may glitter, but its true light is softer, steadier, kinder. And tonight, as you drift into rest, let that softer light guide you, for you, too, are part of this paradox. Bright at times, quiet at others, but always contributing your fragment to the map. And that is enough. You have walked among empires and villages, seen the fireworks and the candles, and you know now how fragile memory can be. But there is another kind of record, one that does not rest in libraries or ruins, but in the spoken word, carried by storytellers through countless nights, myths, tales of floods, fires, skies darkened, mountains trembling. We often think of them as fiction, as metaphors, as bedtime stories for ancient children. Yet, perhaps, if you listen closely, you may hear something else. Geology disguised as story, history written in metaphor because no other language could survive. Myths may be the diaries of the earth itself, retold in human voice. Picture a village at the edge of a river thousands of years ago. The water rises slowly each year, spilling over banks, carrying silt. One year it rises more, sweeping huts away, drowning fields. The people run to higher ground, terrified, bewildered. They have no seismographs, no satellite models, no flood records. They have only memory, grief, and the need to warn their children. So they tell a story of a God angry with humankind, of a flood sent to wash the world clean. The details are embroidered, reshaped, made sacred. But at its core is a fact. The water came, it destroyed. It changed everything. Fact across the world, cultures tell flood stories. Mesopotamian epics, the biblical tale of Noah, Hindu accounts of Manu, Native American legends, Pacific Island myths. Are they all coincidence? Or are they echoes of real events, says dams collapsing, seas rising, rivers swelling beyond memory? Open debate, scholars disagree, yet the persistence of the motif is striking. Now imagine volcanoes. In the Andes, a mountain rumbles, then explodes, ash raining, skies darkening. To the people who saw it, it was the end of the world. How could they describe it? How could they explain fire pouring from stone? They told stories of gods battling, of demons emerging from the underworld, of mountains weeping fire. The details are mythical, but the event is geological. Fact, the eruption of Mount Mazama in North America, which formed Crater Lake about 7,700 years ago, lives on in the oral traditions of local tribes, remembered not as geology but as story. Isn't that extraordinary? Memory preserved not in rock cores but in voices. Think of comets and stars. The sky changes suddenly. A bright light streaks across, followed by years of cold or famine. How would ancient people explain this? They would not speak of impact craters or climate shifts. They would speak of cosmic arrows, of gods casting stones, of skies broken. Hypothesis: some researchers argue that the onset of the Younger Dryas cold period around 12,800 years ago may have left echoes in myth. Sudden floods, sudden freezes, sudden endings. Others disagree, calling it coincidence, pattern seeking. But the stories remain, stubborn as stars. Even if details shift, the emotional core stays. The world once changed abruptly, and we remembered through narrative. Now let yourself imagine sitting by a fire, listening to one of these myths told in its first telling. The storyteller's face glows in the flames, their voice low, words carrying both fear and awe. You, as listener, feel the weight of it, the way it explains what cannot be explained, the way it warns you, comforts you, connects you to forces larger than yourself. Perhaps the story is embroidered with gods and monsters, but perhaps, hidden beneath, is a record of water rising, of fire falling, of stars shifting. You are hearing both myth and diary, metaphor and geology entwined. Isn't it remarkable how memory can wear two masks at once? One mask tells of gods and morals, the other whispers of glaciers and eruptions, and yet both are true in their way. Civilization is not only about accuracy, it is about carrying meaning forward. A flood remembered as divine punishment is still a flood remembered. A mountain remembered as a wrathful god is still a mountain that erupted. Myth preserves the event, if not the explanation. Consider. 2. How myths are repeated ritually, not just once, but again and again. Each retelling renews the memory, refreshes the diary entry. A book might be forgotten on a shelf, but a story told at every festival will endure. Children may not understand the geology hidden within, but they absorb the rhythm, the warning, the awe. And when disaster comes again, perhaps the myth helps them survive, moving to higher ground, preparing for fire, listening to the sky. In this way, myth is more practical than history. It is survival disguised as story. Perhaps you wonder, are we too quick to dismiss myths? In our modern age, we analyze them, dissect them, relegate them to literature. But what if they are more than that? What if they are archives of experience, coded in symbols, because symbols are durable? Ink fades, but metaphors endure. A phrase like "the world drowned" will outlast any technical record. And so maybe we should listen more carefully, not for literal truth, but for echoes of experience. The myth may not tell you exactly when or where, but it may remind you that change comes, that the world shifts, that survival depends on remembering. Now, close your eyes and let the myths swirl around you. Floods, fires, stars, monsters, gods. Hear them not as fiction, but as memory translated into poetry. They are not precise, they are not neat, but they are human, deeply human, and in that humanity lies their strength. We are storytellers, not because we love fantasy, but because we need memory. We cannot always keep records, but we can keep stories. And so we do, over and over, through generations, until even now you can hear the echoes by your own fire, on your own night. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, the flood waters rising. Exhale, the waters receding. Inhale, fire bursting from stone. Exhale, ash settling on earth. Inhale, stars streaking. Exhale, darkness returning. This rhythm is the heartbeat of myth, and it is also the heartbeat of geology. The two are not separate. They are the same tide, translated into different languages. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let those myths be your diary too. Let them remind you that the earth is alive, restless, unpredictable, but also that you are alive, capable of remembering, capable of carrying meaning forward. Civilization is not only ziggurats and empires, it is also stories of floods, whispered across centuries, reminding us that the sea rises, the fire falls, the stars move, and yet we endure. That is the true diary of humanity, written not in ink but in story, not in stone but in breath. And you, tonight, are part of its next entry. You have listened to floods and fires remembered as myth, and now your gaze drifts upward. The sky has always been the oldest book, the first library that no flame could consume, no flood could drown. Tonight, let us wander into that library. Together, imagine lying on your back in the stillness of night, the stars scattered like beads across black velvet. They move so slowly you might think them fixed, but stay long enough, live long enough, and you notice their rhythm. You see constellations rise and fall with the seasons. You watch the moon wax and wane, the sun crawl north and south. The sky is not chaos. It is memory written in light. Long before clocks, before calendars, people lifted their eyes and read. Fact, ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to the Maya, from India to Egypt, tracked the cycles of the heavens with astonishing accuracy. They knew solstices, equinoxes, lunar eclipses. They timed planting and harvest by constellations. They carved alignments into stone, windows that catch the solstice sun, temples that point to rising stars, mounds that glow with dawn on the shortest day. Imagine the patience required years of watching, decades of noting, generations of remembering. This was memory stretched across centuries, encoded in architecture so that even when words faded, the sky itself remained the teacher. Perhaps you wonder, how could they know so much without telescopes? The answer may be simple: time and attention. If every night is spent beneath stars, if each generation passes on observations, then patterns emerge. A child hears, when this star rises, rains will follow. They remember, tell their child, who tells another. Over centuries, knowledge accumulates, a sky-based memory never written but always repeated. Open debate, some scholars argue that certain carvings even encode the great cycle of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis across 26,000 years. If true, that would mean an inheritance of sky knowledge, stretching unimaginably far. Others doubt, suggesting the symbols are poetic, rather than scientific. Both may be right. Poetry itself is a kind of science, a way of noticing. Picture yourself. At such a sight, dawn breaks. You are inside a stone chamber, dark and cold. Suddenly, a narrow shaft of light pierces the passage, striking carvings that glow briefly in gold. Gasps ripple through the gathered crowd. They have waited all year. For this moment, they do not need calendars. The sun has returned, right on time. Relief spreads, crops will grow. The cycle continues. This ritual is not superstition. It is synchronization, memory anchored to the heavens. By repeating it, year after year, the community aligns itself not only with the earth, but with the cosmos. The stars are their archive, the sun their clock, the moon their calendar. And yet, the sky was not only practical, it was also mysterious, overwhelming. Stars were gods, ancestors, fires of another world. Myths wrapped around them like cloaks. Orion became a hunter, the Pleiades, 7 sisters, the Milky Way, a river of souls. These stories, told and retold, anchored memory emotionally as well as practically. You may forget a number, but you do not forget a story. By telling of gods and hunters and sisters, ancient people ensured that sky knowledge would endure. The stars became characters, the constellations, chapters, the sky itself a storybook. Civilization, then, was not only on earth, it was inscribed across the heavens. Now imagine a farmer thousands of years ago. He watches the horizon, noting when a bright star first appears just before dawn. He knows it means the flooding of his river is near. He does not calculate in degrees. He remembers in stories. The star is a herald, a messenger, a reminder. He teaches his children not the math but the myth, because myth is easier to carry, harder to lose. Fact: in Egypt, the rising of Sirius signaled the Nile flood. In Mesoamerica, Venus guided calendars and rituals. In India, lunar mansions divided the sky into 27 segments, each tied to time and fate. These are not just astronomy, they are woven myths, portable and durable. Perhaps you feel wonder at this. We often assume we are more advanced with telescopes and software, and in many ways we are, yet we rarely look up. We rarely remember the sky as our ancestors did. They carried it inside them, embedded in songs, dances, carvings, alignments. Even when empires fell, the stars returned each night, steady as breath. That continuity may be the deepest form of memory we know. When all else fails, look up. The same stars your ancestors saw still burn above you. You are connected, whether you notice or not. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, stars rising. Exhale, stars setting. Inhale, moon full. Exhale, moon dark. Inhale, solstice sun. Exhale, equinox, shadow. Your breath is their calendar. The rhythm is the same, unbroken across time. And consider this. Maybe some of the sky knowledge was not discovered anew each time, but inherited. Hypothesis: it is possible that fragments of observation survived cataclysms, passed orally through myth, then embedded again in architecture. Perhaps the builders of later temples were remembering whispers from much earlier times, or perhaps they rediscovered it themselves, eyes open, patient. Either way, the persistence is remarkable. Knowledge flows like a river, sometimes clear, sometimes muddy, sometimes diverted, but always moving forward. So tonight, as you lie still, imagine the sky as a vast scroll, unrolling endlessly above you. The stars are ink, the planets punctuation, the sun and moon the rhythm of phrases. You are reading without knowing you are reading. Every culture has read this scroll, has written its own interpretation, has carried fragments into the future. Some call it myth, some call it astronomy, but both are memory. And in remembering, civilization continues. Let yourself drift now, eyes half closed, as though you too are lying on a grassy hill thousands of years ago, a child at your side, an elder pointing upward. That star, they say, is the sign of change. That cluster is the mark of the season. That path of light is where our ancestors walk. You listen, you nod, you remember. You may not understand the science, but you absorb the story. And one day you will point upward and say the same words. That is civilization, not perfection, but continuity, not certainty, but connection. Tonight, let the stars be your lullaby. Let their slow drift remind you that memory is patient, that knowledge can survive in the silence of night. Civilization is not only written in books or carved in stone. It is written in the sky, and the sky is still here, waiting for you to read that you have wandered through the sky library, felt the patience of stars, and now the memory of earth pulls you downward again, not into calm soil this time, but into chaos. For while some changes arrive, slowly rivers shifting, seas rising inch by inch, others come suddenly, with violence that sears itself into memory. Floods, ice bursts, storms, collapses, catastrophes that turn villages into ruins in a single night. Tonight, let us drift into that uneasy space, not to frighten, but to remember how the earth can rewrite its story in an instant, and how humans, fragile but persistent, turned those shocks into legend. Imagine a great lake trapped behind ice, its waters pressing silently against a frozen wall. For centuries the dam holds, until one day, under pressure or heat, it cracks. In hours, billions of gallons rush forward, carving valleys, tearing forests, sweeping animals and people alike. Fact geologists call such events glacial outburst, floods, and we know they happened in North America as the last ice age ended. Entire regions were reshaped overnight. To those who lived through it, it must have felt like the end of the world. No wonder so many myths tell of deluges, torrents, seas swallowing plains. Perhaps those stories are not exaggeration, but memories of nights when the world itself unraveled. Picture yourself standing in a valley when the wall of water comes. At first it is a sound, distant thunder, then a roar like the earth, itself screaming. You run, but the water runs faster. Trees splinter, rocks tumble, animals cry. You cling to a high ridge, watching your village vanish below, smoke and huts and fields gone in minutes. Later, when you tell the children, you cannot describe it as geology. You describe it as judgment, as gods, as the flood that ended one age and began another. The myth is born, and it will carry what you cannot explain. Open debate some researchers. Link the Younger Dryas, the sudden return of glacial cold around 12,800 years ago, to such catastrophic events, striking ice sheets, lakes bursting, oceans disrupted. Others say it was slower, less violent, more complex, but whether sudden or gradual, the effect was real. Climate shifted, animals disappeared, humans scattered, adapted, survived. Imagine the confusion. Seasons reversed, summers turned bitter, harvests failed. How could you not remember? How could you not turn that confusion into story? so the next generation would know the world can change overnight. Consider the rising seas. Fact, around 8,200 years ago, a massive glacial lake in North America emptied into the Atlantic, raising sea levels by several meters in just a few years. Entire coastlines vanished. Fields became bays. Villages became reefs. People were forced to move, carrying with them the memory of water that would not stop rising. It is no wonder that across continents, flood myths echo one another. They may not all describe the same event, but they describe the same trauma. The feeling of ground betrayed, of permanence dissolved. Now picture ice itself. You are living on the edge of a glacier. To you, it is not frozen water, but a living being, groaning, cracking, advancing. Each spring, ice calves into rivers, creating floods. Some years, the melt is sudden, drowning valleys. To explain, you say the glacier is alive, angry, punishing. You tell your children, respect it, honor it, fear it. In this way, memory of ice persists, long after the glacier retreats. When descendants walk through green valleys, they still whisper of ice giants, who once ruled here. The myth is warning disguised as wonder. Fire, too, leaves scars. Imagine a mountain exploding, as Mount Mazama did in North America, creating Crater Lake. Ash-covered skies for weeks. Crops failed, the sun dimmed. Fact, oral traditions of tribes in the region still recall the eruption as a battle of spirits, a mountain destroyed in anger. The details are mythical, but the memory of destruction is geological. Isn't it extraordinary how memory can persist not in rock samples, but in words carried for thousands of years? When geologists drilled cores, they found layers of ash. When elders told stories, they spoke of the same ash in different language. Both records true, both valuable. Perhaps you ask, why did people turn disasters into sacred stories rather than practical manuals? Because fear needs meaning. If the flood is random, you are helpless. If it is divine, you can appease. Story gives control where none exists. Yet hidden inside that sacred frame is survival knowledge. Move to higher ground. Watch the mountain. Respect the ice. Plant after the flood recedes. These lessons are embedded in myth because myth ensures they will be remembered. A manual can be lost. A story is repeated. Civilization endures, not by avoiding catastrophe, but by remembering it well enough to adapt. Now, let yourself sit by a fire with survivors of such an event. Their voices tremble, their eyes reflect flames. They speak of gods, of wrath, of endings. But you, listening, hear also the undercurrent. The water came quickly. The mountain exploded. The sky grew dark. You realize you are hearing both story and science, both grief and record. You understand that to survive, they had to tell it this way. You feel the humility of knowing that even now, with satellites and sensors, you are not beyond such changes. The world can still shift suddenly. You, too, may one day need to turn trauma into story, so your descendants remember. Breathe with that thought. Inhale, waters rising. Exhale, waters retreating. Inhale, ice cracking. Exhale, valleys flooding. Inhale, mountains burning. Exhale, ash falling. Your breath mirrors the rhythm of catastrophe, sudden yet cyclical, destructive yet fertile. For even in destruction, new soil forms, new rivers flow, new memories grow. Civilization is not about avoiding change, but about folding it into story, carrying it forward like a scar that guides healing. And so tonight, As you drift deeper, let those stories of floods and ice and fire settle into you. They are not meant to frighten, but to remind. The world has changed before, suddenly and utterly, and humanity endured by remembering. You are here because ancestors turned disaster into myth, grief into memory, chaos into story. That is their gift to you. Civilization is not only built on triumph, but also on survival, on the ability to whisper, "It happened, it can happen again, be ready." Let that whisper comfort you, for it means you are part of a long chain of resilience. You have drifted through floods and fires, through the sudden violence of nature, and now the tide of memory carries you back to human hands. For if the earth itself can shape valleys and mountains, so too can people, in their own way, carve stone, raise monuments, and leave behind puzzles that echo long after their makers are gone. Tonight, let us walk among the stones, again not the scattered blocks on a plateau only, but the ones shaped with such precision that you hesitate to call them ancient. Their lines are too sharp, their joins too seamless, their weight too great, and yet they are undeniably old, whispering of techniques both remembered and forgotten. Imagine a wall in Peru, its stones fitted together so closely that a blade cannot slide between them. Each block is massive, irregular in shape, yet they interlock perfectly as though poured into place. You touch the surface and feel its smoothness, not rough, but polished. Fact sites like Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo show this uncanny precision, the kind that resists earthquakes by flexing rather than cracking. Archaeologists explain that with time, patience, and simple tools, such work is possible. The stones may have been pounded with hammerstones, shaped over weeks, even months, then dragged into place by coordinated teams. And yet, as you stand before them in your mind's eye, you cannot help but wonder at the dedication required. Perhaps you imagine the workers again, a line of people hauling ropes, chanting in rhythm, heaving stones inch by inch. Others crouch with tools, pounding edges until they fit. Dust fills the air, the sun beats down, sweat drips. Day after day, season after season, the wall rises. There is no mystery machine, no forgotten laser, only human persistence. And isn't persistence itself a kind of miracle? Civilization may not need lost technologies. It may need only the will to keep trying, the patience to shape stone until it yields. Yet still, the precision unsettles. The angles are so true, the grooves so clean, that you hesitate. Open debate, could such detail be achieved with only stone, hammers and rope? Some suggest yes, pointing to experiments showing that with granite pounders and sand abrasives, blocks can be worked into fine fits. Others shake their heads, noting that tolerances are within millimeters, difficult to imagine, without advanced tools. Which side is right? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. The truth is slippery, like light on polished stone. Now picture another Saitpomapunku, with its H-shaped blocks, carved with deep grooves and right angles. They look as though they belong to an assembly line, components of some vast, unfinished machine. Archaeologists note that andesite, the stone used, is hard but workable with persistence. Fact studies show that with copper, chisels, hammerstones and sand, such cuts are possible, though laborious. Still, the sight of so many precise blocks scattered in ruins leaves room for awe. Were they once part of a grand temple? Were they abandoned mid-construction? Or were they dismantled by time and reuse, their purpose forgotten? As you wander through this mental landscape, you realize the debate itself is part of the memory. Every groove carries not only the echo of ancient hands, but the echo of modern questions. Why here? Why like this? How? And perhaps the real gift of these stones is not the answers, but the humility they demand. They remind you that human ingenuity is both ordinary and extraordinary, that persistence can look like magic from a distance. Consider also that techniques can be lost. Fact, Roman concrete, durable for millennia, fell out of use and had to be rediscovered in modern times. Damascus, steel, with its legendary sharpness, vanished for centuries before its methods were studied anew. If such losses could occur in recorded history, why not in deeper time? Hypothesis, perhaps some methods of shaping stone, simple but effective, were known and then forgotten, erased by collapse, by migration, by cultural amnesia. Not machines, not mysteries, but knowledge lost to silence. That possibility is sobering and strangely comforting. It tells you that civilization is fragile, not because it cannot achieve wonders, but because it can forget them. Imagine again the craftsman crouched with chisel, patient, steady. His child watches, learns, repeats. Then one day the line breaks. The child does not remember. The chisel is laid down. The knowledge fades. Generations later, the wall still stands, but the technique is gone. People marvel, argue, invent theories. The stones become questions rather than tools. And maybe that is inevitable. Every civilization leaves behind not only answers, but riddles. We are meant to puzzle, to wonder, to stretch our imagination. Without riddles, memory might fade more quickly. Questions keep it alive. Perhaps you wonder, why strive for such precision at all? Why not simply stack stones roughly, build walls? Less exact, because precision is itself a statement. It says, we care, we endure, we honor. It may have been sacred, ceremonial, symbolic. The tighter the fit, the stronger the claim. To carve with such detail is to show reverence to gods, to ancestors, to the community itself. Civilization is not only utility, it is also devotion. And devotion leaves grooves as sharp as any tool.